Okay. So this is intended to be an update to the Macksfesten Bleeding Edge based build that I posted earlier. I have a build guide, and this is more or less to sort of address some of the problems people were having, some of the questions people were asking in regards to its survivability or why their damage might be low. So I'm hoping to address some of the key components that maybe the other video was too long to actually get to the point where they saw the explanation, or perhaps I just glossed over it entirely. Like, I know I skipped over one of the skills, the ice from the sky skill, in which case I had to answer that in a comment. But effectively, we'll start with the tree, and I made some changes. The most notable change is I went over to the EOS tree. And the reason why I did that is because it came to my attention that Beacon for the Lost is a more multiplier that we can take advantage of. And what it basically does is, if you have less than 50% energy shield, you get this large bonus in terms of damage, right? So because we're using the Frostweave armor, which has some amount of energy shield on it, we have some amount of energy shield to burn in the first place. So, if you look at Frostweave, it's got 621 force shield. So you always have some amount of base force shield, in this case 2600. And then you kind of get left with the question of, okay, how do I actually burn my force shield so that I'm put in a position where I'm taking advantage of this node. Now it says that your force shield has to be above 0, but it appears to be working at 0. So when you use Juggernaut to burn your force shield entirely and put it into your shield like so, you can see that the tooltip jumps up by a large value, right? So it is actually working in the case where if you're at 0, you still take advantage of that. The other node that's close within 3 points is Dawn's Pious Striker, which is effectively a cull at 15%. So the way you have to look at this is 15% more damage effectively, and then this is going to be about 35% more damage. What you're trading off by going for these nodes is the attack speed from Intravenous Neural Cord and a little bit of crit here, as well as the crit in these two nodes. Now, in reality, 60% crit chance score is not as efficient as ailment chance when you're using Frostweave. It's not bad by any means, but it's also not pound for pound the best thing you can get. In fact, I believe crit multi nodes, the increased crit damage nodes are going to outperform the critical strike nodes. So in either case, dropping these is not a huge issue. I think I lost a total of like 8 or so % crit by losing all of these nodes. And, if you were to say 8% crit and you have, let's say you have 400% crit multi on the sheet, which you subtract the 100 from the base value, I believe that's how they do it in this game, you're left with basically a tripling of your damage 70% of the time. So 7 times 3 is 21. You get basically, basically 21%, which is just not even close to, what you're going to get from the other nodes. It's not 20% more damage, but basically like 21% effectiveness. You would figure that out by basically doing, like, if you said you did 100 damage, you basically multiply 60% crit, so 60 of the 100 times 3, so you get 180, and then the remaining 40 is at 1, so you add the 40, right? So you're at 220 or something like that as your base damage, and then you'd compare that to what it would mean if you were to be at like 70 crit, the difference being 10 more. You're basically going to get 10 more damage at triple the value minus the base that would have already been there. So anyway, at the end of the day, this cluster is insane. It's really, really good. And it also just makes it feel a lot smoother. Okay, the other thing that I changed is I took Backline Raider. This node is a quality of life node. The thing that I think is really important to realize with this type of build is it's very much based on your reaction time. You need to be able to move, you need to be able to dodge things. You can't just sit and tank everything. It's not a shield block build where you just like sit, and if you happen to get hit by something or everything, you're okay. It's not a big deal. It's intentionally trading offense for defense. So picking up more attack and cast speed just makes the whole build feel more buttery smooth. And we still have our capture velocity. So this is the new tree. And yeah, it's a heck of a lot more damage. In terms of the skills, we still have Anomaly. The talent points are still going to be exactly the same. For Juggernaut, we just mainly need the damage absorption to take away from our energy shield and dump into that, so that we can proc that huge more multiplier in the tree we just talked about. Everything else is just like, oh, additional shield. Maybe you want it to have a chance at stunning, you know. And then the Fizz to Fire is how we're proccing our fire portion of Immortal Offering. So I'll just go into packs and just double click it and get a fire debuff on all the mobs, and then just proc, you know, all of the proc the fire buff that I'm getting that more multiplier within. Bleeding Edge still is the same exact runes. You can always change out the area of effect for the increased damage if you wanted to, but when you go through the math, like if you do it initially and you look at your Bleeding Edge and you swap in weapon skill, weapon damage, and you get like 60% more, your tooltip might go from like 25.9 to 30. And you might be like, oh, hey, this is like a really good thing. But the way this build works is you're getting a large portion from your spell bonus. So like if you look at that 25.9 and you drop one spell, right? Now we're at 4,495, and then you go and you drop your energy shield, and now you're at 49, right? So you're at like basically 50k, and then when you factor in the weapon damage, it becomes like less than 2k difference or something. It's pretty inconsequential compared to the comfort of having increased AoE. The other thing that we changed is we now use Arctic Spear. The nice thing about Arctic Spear is Arctic Spear can be cast while you're doing your Blade Flurry, right? So you can hold it, and you can be proccing it. Now the reason this is important is it's really threefold. So first off, you get Sacred debuff from, or Sacred proccing for Immortal Offering, so there's more damage. Secondly, you're getting some Rage Sustain, which is pretty nice if you use it situationally correctly. It's going to allow you to stay over that 750 rage. And then finally, the fact that you're applying Sacred damage as your last thing. If you look at your Bleeding Edge, you're now applying weakness with your Bleeding Edge, right? So you're for sure going to have full weakness stacks between the rapidly hitting Arctic Spear plus Bleeding Edge, which is a huge defensive bonus. So it's something that you really have to prioritize, and it's something that a lot of people kind of like, you know, you get your weakness stacks from like a block usually, and then it's okay because it probably is going to be at max weakness stacks if it's hitting, if there are enough mobs to be hitting you quick enough to where you're stacking up to 30. I'm not sure if multiple stacked ailments like on a ring is going to effectively apply to like a block chance. So like if you had 2 from the node where you block and you apply 2 weakness, I don't know if it gets to the doubling from the tree, or like in my case, the other 6 applied ailments that I have there. So that's why Arctic Spear is there. Okay, and then the last node, this is more or less up to you as to what you want to do. Okay, so you could use Solar Fall, which is pretty nice because it gives you a resistance bonus. It casts faster than the Ice Falling spell tier of Aethelial, and it's going to apply fire max stacks. So this is kind of like the higher DPS way of going about it if you go down to Solar Fall, but the damage is so high anyway, and they nerf toughness for some reason. So I mean, even on a boss where I don't have my Immortal Offering stacked and I don't have full like fire stacks, you know, on the boss, I still kill them fine with toughness, and even like material shield toughness, it doesn't matter. You know, it might take a few seconds, but like sometimes if there are mobs, it's gone, and if there are no mobs, it's like fine. But the reason I take Liver Mortis is because Liver Mortis, the mob is going to take damage away from you. And the reason this is such an important situation for us is because there are like 3 defensive ways to go in this game from what I can tell, right? You've got max block, you've got all resist, and you've got dodge. And you're stacking one of those 3 typically, okay? And the way you kind of got to look at this is if you have all resist at like 50%, okay? So if you go to the character sheet, and you say, oh, I'm looking at my all resist, and I'm at like 62.8% mitigated damage, you know, whatever, 60% for everything. And if you were to go an all resist build, it's like super common to get up to 80%. And the way you have to look at it is if you were at 80%, right, and then you were to go to 85% all resist, it looks like it's only 5%, but in reality, if you look at it like the amount of damage you're taking, so if you had gotten hit for 100 damage and 80% is gone, right, and you're hit for the remaining 20, and then you were to remove 5% more of that, you're removing 5 of the 20, so you're left with 15. So it's actually like you're relatively removing 25% of the damage taken from what you're seeing as your damage taken. So if you were to get hit by something and it hit you for like, let's say 100k in this particular case, and you're like, holy hell, I'm getting hit so hard, and then you were to get 5% more all resist, all of a sudden you're getting hit for 25k less. Okay, so that's a really big defensive bonus if you're going in that direction. So because of the fact that on our tree we're not actually stacking all resist to this in the same way, where you're benefiting from like flat all resist the same way you would if you were maybe pathing down through all of this all resist and then coming down to salvatory anchor, and you're really prioritizing all resist. You know, I don't benefit in the same way, right? In fact, I actually traded out my all resist helm, which was like a 680 or something all resist helm. Pretty okay, had all the mods that I wanted. You can get them higher than that. They can go up to like 750, 800. And if you're running Salvatore Anchor, having another flat 800 is insane if you're stacking all res. But because of the fact that we're not stacking all res and we're at 60%, Livor Mortis I believe is like 20 or 30% basically damage mitigation, like damage reduction is how you have to look at it. So you have to ask how much all res, how much of a defensive investment would I have to make to get 20 or 30% when I'm only mitigating 60%? Okay, so when you have like the remaining 40 and you say, well, what would it take to get 20 or 30%? So 30% of 40, you'd need 12% more all res, right? And to get 12% more all res would require probably in the order of, you know, every piece of this being perfect, you know, like 455 all res here. This needs to be probably closer to like, I don't know, 250 all res. Your pants got to have 800 all res, and then your helm. And then now you're sitting at that point where you've spent mods on your gear to do that when you could have had other affixes, right, that could have benefited you offensively. So Livor Mortis is, in my opinion, a really efficient skill to have. It's like a really efficient thing to use because of the damage mitigation, and it's like a super noticeable situation. I'll go in and I'll have Untainteds like skewer me, right, and they almost kill me, especially if other mobs are on me and I don't have bleeding edge up and I'm getting like ticked. But if I have Livor Mortis, that risk almost goes away entirely. Okay. So hopefully that answers the questions in terms of like some of the defenses that you have at your beck and call and some of the offensive things that need to happen. I'm not going to put a gameplay video in this particular one. I have a 1 minute 46 run of an Untainted 187. You can watch it. I had Warcry instead of Livor Mortis in that one, which I think is clunkier. The only reason I was testing Warcry was because I was curious if Warcry's bonus applied to the buffs of Immortal Offering, giving you even more insane damage, but in reality that's, you know, unnecessary. The last thing I want to address, and I know the video is really long, but frankly this is not the video for like somebody who's just looking to get a quick build. It's ultimately an in-depth guide for the most part so that you have an understanding of the game's mechanics or what you're looking to do in ARPGs as a general rule. The last thing was we use the Macksfesten interact, okay, and we've swapped this for this catalyst. Now, the reason I swapped this is for a few reasons, okay? And it's going to be a little bit long-winded, but ultimately, it's like this. The Macksfesten interact is going to give you 30% of your spell damage into your like your bleeding edge attack. That's huge. It's very difficult to beat it. The only reason I beat it with this is because I'm using Frostweave, so elemental chance score becomes crit damage when you factor it in, and you basically do the math as a comparison between the 30% you would have had with Frostweave compared to the increased crit plus crit damage. And then I had to roll transfer time on it because otherwise you have to use yet another gem slot, right? So it's kind of interchangeable. If I were to hit freeze chance score on this, which I think I could have hit with transfer time, crit damage, and elemental element chance, but I have to check the prefixes and suffix. Maybe this is ideal. But there are arguably like 2 dead mods on this spell damage, and then the duration of weakness is more or less like okay. But I needed lightning damage to spells either on a ring or on my catalyst. And the reason I needed lightning to spells is because there's no good lightning skill. If you change your anomaly to be a lightning skill, you can't practice. You can't proc captured velocity right here. So then you lose like a lot of attack and cast speed. There's literally not a single lightning spell that I wanted to use. If you look through them and you look at all the ways to proc it, they're just, the turret is clunky. The lightning spell itself, like the chain lightning one, it doesn't like feel very good or anything like that. So there's just no way to proc like the. Oh, and I apologize, noobs. I'll definitely answer your question. I just wanted to get like a short video up for everybody who is like asking questions on the build, and I'm just gonna like kick this over to YouTube so they have that. So sorry I didn't address your message just yet. So yeah, like this catalyst in comparison to the Macksfesten, it's better by about 10%, and it's not like an enormous amount, but it's definitely something to that I was looking to do for a while. And that's 10% based off the raw damage of Bleeding Edge. That's not including any sort of like subsequent spell damage that comes into that. So that allows me to not have lightning damage on my ring, which makes it just like a little bit easier to hit something like 2 ailments plus, attack gain damage, and then like, whatever, freeze chance or crit damage or elemental ailment chance or crit chance or anything like that. So looking at the values that I have here, I'm at like 140k health, pretty good amount of health. My resists are 60%, like we talked about earlier. My crit's 74.8. That's going to go up in the next few levels because I'm going to recapture these crit nodes here. And yeah, so honestly in the next 2 levels I'll probably pick up these 2 crit nodes, and then after I get past that point I'll probably reevaluate everything and see where I want to path. Maybe I have new options because I have like 3 or more points available. But anyway, that's kind of the build guide. Again, you can see gameplay video in the short in like the short 1 minute 46 run. The gameplay style is very similar, but yeah, I have old VODs if you want to look through them. So anyway, hopefully that helps. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask. You can. I'm on the Wolcen Discord. It's under Sclot, my name here. My Twitch is OCD Carpentry, OCD_Carpentry. I'm usually doing woodworking streams and like my job, but yeah, hopefully this stuff helps. Okay, so.